My bike's done 44,000 kilometres and the front brake pads are getting close to the end of their life, so it's time to change them. This is a very straightforward task and it's quite embarrassing to even make a video on how I'm doing it. And remember, I'm just a backyard tinkerer, so don't take my advice. Once the two bolts are out, it's easy to slip the caliper off the disc. Because clearances are tight, it's best to put a rag on the back of the caliper so that you don't scratch your rim. You can see the pads are down to about 1 mil left, so it's time to replace them. Mistake number 1, I should have really loosened this bolt before I took it off the disc. But fortunately, it wasn't that hard to crack it. A little bit of lubrication spray on this pin just helps it slide out a bit easier. Mistake number 2, I should have been pushing down on the pads back onto that spring so that the pin came out easier. But I eventually got it out without any dramas. The pin has a bit of crap on it, so I'll clean that up before I put it back in. Okay, the pads just come right out now, no problem at all. We need to squeeze those pistons right back in, but mistake number 3, I should have sprayed some brake cleaner on everything and cleaned it at this stage. Anyway, before I go squeezing pistons in, I need to take the cap off my brake fluid reservoir and check the fluid level, because as I squeeze those pistons in, the fluid level is going to come up and I don't want it to overflow. I can see that the level is quite high and I'll need to take some fluid out. Now the easiest way I've found to take fluid out is just get a nice clean paper towel and soak up a bit of fluid with the paper towel. Being careful not to drop any on the bike as I remove the towel. I'm going to use a simple G-clamp to squeeze those pistons back in. But because there's 2 pistons, I need to squeeze them both in at the same time. So I'm just going to put one of the old pads back in place, which will squeeze on the pistons, put the G-clamp over everything, and then screw away. Alright, so they're right back in. They need to be right back in because the new pads, of course, are a lot thicker than the old ones that I took out. You can see that the pistons are right back in now. This is where I remembered I really should have been cleaning everything. Oh well. No cure for just dumb stupidity, I guess. Mistake number 4, the little spring clip fell out and I didn't know how it went back in. Fortunately, Wendy's 500X has the same brake caliper, so I pulled that off, found out how the spring clip goes back in, and it goes back in like that, pushes down on a little lug there, and Bob's your uncle. I've cleaned up the retaining pin, but I'm just going to put a little smear of grease on the shaft of that pin, just so that it doesn't corrode. And because I've been caught before, I get the new pads and just make absolutely sure that they're exactly the same shape as the old pads that I've taken out. Yes, they're perfect. The new pads slide in and then the retaining pin holds them in place. You've got to push the pads down onto the spring clip so you can get that retaining pin in. It's a little bit fiddly. But I get it in and give it a good old screwing. And use my experienced torque wrench to tighten it up. I'm just using a screwdriver to carefully push the pads back into where they should be so it's easier to slide over the disc. The caliper slides easily onto the disc. There's quite a bit of free play now because I've pushed the pistons right back in. Some people like to put Loctite back on these bolts, but I've never found it necessary. And again, I use the experienced torque wrench to tighten up those bolts. Mistake number 5, and I'm really pooed off about this one. I should have put something behind the G-clamp. I've now scratched the front of my caliper. What an idiot. Anyway, I need to pump the front brake so that it pushes the pistons onto the brake pads and pushes the brake pads onto the disc. This takes a little bit because there's quite a bit of free play. You can see the number of times I'm pressing on the brake until it goes hard, and you can see the fluid level going down as well. With the fluid level topped off, the job's done. The wheel won't spin freely till you take it for a ride and bed those brakes in.